It's Jimbo Times. Hey, what is going on, Los Angeles? It's J.T. and I hope that you are very well. Today is December 1st, 2023, and if you are a renter, which about 5.4 million of us in LA County are, then you know that today the rent is or was due. Approximately some 3 million renters in LA County are actually rent burdened or are paying more than half of their monthly income on rent. And so, as the cost of living continues to rise, you have more and more renters out there here in Los Angeles, but also across the nation, who are increasingly on the edge. And so, yours truly certainly wants to pay respect to those familias, to those señoras, to those señores, and the rest of the people who make our communities home. I submit nothing but my best wishes as this first passes. I know that it can be quite a difficult time for a number of us out there as we struggle to persist, as we struggle to keep up with this system, the system of capitalism, the system of land theft, the system of interest rates and redlining, which we continue to have to abide by. But with that said, I also just wanted to issue this special report, because at the end of this week in Los Angeles are a number of items that I think we can and should just keep in mind as the final weeks of the year wrap up and we move on to 2024, an election year. So, as you know, yours truly has been at various protests and demonstrations, and I've also just published over at Making a Neighborhood with my friends and colleagues regarding the Hollywood March and Rally calling for a ceasefire on Wednesday, November 15th. If you haven't yet checked it out, please do. But apart from that, there are a few other local items that I would like on the Los Cuentos radar. So why don't we just get into those, and why don't we start with the fact that yesterday, that is on the final day of November 30th, 2023, there was a debate between Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, and Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. And so a number of folks tuned this out or just completely missed it. I totally get that, especially for workers in California and people who are just trying to maintain here. Gavin Newsom and his presidential aspirations are definitely the last things on their mind. And we just noted the rent being due, didn't we? So for sure, I can imagine that millions and millions of Californians had far better things to do than to watch this debate. At the same time, I think that it's important to understand why Gavin Newsom is running what has been called a shadow campaign for president, why he's been uplifting his profile and getting to as many public appearances as possible. And the reason I think it's important is because, especially in the state of California, we've actually just had Dianne Feinstein pass away. And Dianne Feinstein's sudden death, after she insisted she was totally okay, has created this sudden vacancy in California Senate offices, and now there's a race for that, right? And one of the hopefuls for that office is none other than Adam Schiff, the congressional representative at the House of Representatives for the Hollywood area, the Echo Park area, and a range of places in between, going all the way up to a small slice of West Pasadena and Burbank, and going all the way down to just about the East Hollywood area, not quite stretching into K-Town and Little Bangladesh and such, but these are the parameters. There are, of course, hundreds of thousands of residents through this area, and with Schiff leaving the congressional seat to pursue the senator's seat, there's a vacancy all of a sudden. After 20 years, that is, because he's been repping this area for just about 20 years. And so, yeah, ever since I was around 13 years old or so, I suppose, Adam Schiff has been the sole representative, rarely challenged, mostly just at the helm of that seat out in DC. And so now we definitely have to think about a number of new candidates for the office. But the reason I bring that up is because, well, yes, the current ticket is supposed to feature Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for the Democratic Party's pitch for the executive office for the presidency of the United States. But that's a little over some 11 months from now. Not quite a year, but still a ways away. And if Dianne Feinstein could insist at some point in March 2023 that she was totally A-OK, totally good to do the job, that there was nothing to worry about with respect to her senator's position, and then less than a year later, certainly less than 11 months later, suddenly pass away on us to create this vacancy, then you should certainly trust that something similar enough can take place for Joe Biden, who is now 81, now the oldest serving president in history, the last I checked. And so, for sure, someone such as Newsom, who is the governor of the largest, richest state in the union, is doing what he can to boost his profile, to meet as many voters all the way out in Georgia, which is where the debate with DeSantis was. And so, naturally, he's got to get out there. And I think it's a little funny that a handful of folks out there, including at the local LA Times, have actually questioned why Newsom went through with the debate in the first place. Obviously, it's okay to question, but I think it's like asking a question that has a very obvious answer. It's because he needs to represent the best of the next generation of the Democratic Party. It's because if Biden steps away, why shouldn't Newsom pursue a vice presidency along Kamala Harris in 2024? There's absolutely a need for somebody to step up and fill that void if and when necessary. So naturally, he's got to get out there, do what he can. And I think Newsom definitely won the debate. I think it's hard to argue otherwise. Certainly, DeSantis has his fans somewhere here and there, but even a quick scroll through X or Twitter a couple of hours after the debate, looking for DeSantis and a clear handful of folks out there who certainly thought he won, that was quite the task, I tell you. And ultimately, really, not very many people who one could take seriously actually thought that DeSantis walked away successfully from this. I mean, he's 41 points behind in his own home state of Florida to Donald Trump. And so, even in his own home state, there's been a serious abandonment of the idea that he could reach the presidency in the upcoming year. At the same time, with Newsom getting his point across and meeting potentially millions of viewers on Fox News, like or dislike, the point is that Newsom got right in front of viewers. The point is that Newsom introduced himself to people who are not yet familiar with his brand, but who, over the next 4 or 5 years or less, will certainly be seeing a lot more from him. And so, yeah, that's kind of an analysis on the aesthetic purposes of the event, like why it was good in terms of appearances. But for those who say it doesn't matter and it's all optics anyway, and these are all imposters or hacks or what's the other term that I'm looking for here? I know that it's there. Grifters. Yes, yes, and yes. That is correct. However, as was pointed out to me just a couple of weeks ago in a discussion over the presidency and what that's going to look like, how it's going to come down to the swing states, a friend of mine made a very good point, which was that as soon as Biden is out of office and say a Trump or some other Republican lunatic or some other MAGA Republican or their equivalent is elected into office, certain jobs, including many jobs that employ people working in the public interest, are just gone out the window and totally done with for at least the next 4 years. And so when it comes down to these parties and what they stand for, I do think that it's important for us to get beyond just the personalities and to see who it is that they actually employ in office. And so, for example, when it came down in LA to Karen Bass versus Rick Caruso, the natural choice for folks who were anywhere in their right mind in terms of what the city's social and infrastructural needs are was that Bass was definitely the better choice, was that Bass was definitely going to employ far more people that Los Angeles needs during this moment of crisis, this moment of so much homelessness and so much rent burden and so many other challenges that we face. The same exact formula applies at the top. And so when we think about a Democratic ticket versus a Republican ticket, I do think it's important to think about the jobs aspect and the infrastructural aspect, not just the personalities, but the thousands and tens of thousands of people that they ultimately employ and get to the offices and institutions where we need them to be. So that's yours truly's notes on the Newsom and DeSantis debate. I don't quite recommend that anybody watch it, but I would say that that's kind of a Spark Notes version of it from yours truly. Okay, with that said, back to Los Angeles, where we've had a number of key developments over just the past few days here. Number one, independent redistricting or remapping is coming to Los Angeles. That's right, just this 2024, voters in LA are going to get to choose whether they approve of an independent redistricting commission or not. And I think that more of us, far more of us, are in the affirmative than otherwise, baby. I am confident of this initiative's passage, and I was happy to see Nithya Raman as well as the LA City Council President Paul Krikorian announce this successful recommendation from the LA City Council. So independent redistricting and remapping have been looked at, they have been discussed. There have been a number of details that LA City Council has gotten into as to how the independent commission will function once it's through, but after after a year of folks calling out LA City Council and calling out the backroom dealing that has been rampant to LA City Council's redistricting for decades at this point, finally we are getting an independent set of remappers, folks who will not be beholden to some individual LA City Council member who gets the ultimate say as to whether they like the map that their commissioners have recommended or not. So independent redistricting is coming. Stay tuned for that. More details soon. Just know that if you've advocated for it, if you've called out LA City Council for it and then some, this is your moment, and it is also what democracy looks like. So shout out to all of those out there advocating for a better system here. Now, as for expansion of the LA City Council, the LA City Council did have a conversation as to what an expanded council can look like. They did not come to a final resolution on that, though. They voiced a number of ideas, a number of potential directions that they could head in, but they did not ultimately make a recommendation for the larger LA City Council to see through. And so it's essentially been punted over to January. The commission, that is the Governance Reform Commission or something to that effect, they're meeting again in January, and hopefully then we finally have a number that might also be placed on the ballot this very 2024. But there were a number of notes on the potential expansion of LA City Council that I think are important to keep in mind, including that currently LA City Council already struggles with vacancies in each council member's office. That is, with not enough staff members, with not enough resources, with not enough people and people power to deliver basic services. Currently, it takes some 7 years to fix a sidewalk or broken road or crevice out there. And so that is a significant concern in terms of how the council can expand and do so successfully, given that it's already understaffed. So I do think that in the days ahead and going into January, it's important for the council as well as, once again, these advocates, the line of them out there, to get into the details, to see how these concerns might be alleviated, and to place this in front of voters in 2024, because most people would agree that 15 city council members, which is a system that was designed about 100 years ago when LA was about a fourth of its size, when there were just a million people living in the city of Los Angeles rather than 4 million of them. Most people would agree that that number is not functional, that 15 individuals cannot represent 250,000 residents successfully. So stay tuned for that discussion, but do follow up to the best of your ability. Do link up with an org. I personally recommend checking out LA Forward and some of the discussions they've had, including with Alyssa Walker, about the expansion of the council and more. Okay, with that said, I want to speak briefly about the latest from Making a Neighborhood. Making a Neighborhood is a newsletter by yours truly, as well as Samantha Helu Hernandez and Ali Rachel Pearl. The three of us, neighbors, friends, and collaborators, have been at this for about 2.5 years almost. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you can subscribe for absolutely free at makinganeighborhood.substack.com. I'll be sure to place that on the show notes, but up to this point, you can read somewhere in the range of 64, 65 different articles that we've published that are dedicated to East Hollywood and the central LA area that we know here. There are pieces on Hollywood, pieces on K-Town, and my colleagues have also written beautifully and photographed beautifully about plant life in the neighborhood. They have written about the 5 senses of gentrification. There are pieces that were originally featured on our magazine over at the Making a Neighborhood website, and there are also guest pieces. We had up to 5 different guest contributions just over the past few months. And so it's a really special newsletter. And if you're at all in the East Hollywood area or in central LA, I absolutely recommend going and checking it out and supporting to the best of your ability. You can subscribe for free. But if you have the means to pay for your subscription, that goes to supporting the project, that goes to paying guest contributors, and so on. I totally recommend that you check it out if you haven't yet. So please have that on your radar. And before you forget, tap in right away. Just click on the link through the show notes, and we totally got you. We totally got you covered. With that said, the latest from Making a Neighborhood actually features yours truly reflecting on the march and rally in Hollywood on Wednesday, November 15th, which we rebroadcast the contents of on JT the LA Storyteller podcast over the past couple of weeks. But go and read the piece and pass it along to some friends who may not know yet about Jewish Voice for Peace or Mayor Constantine Anthony rescinding his endorsement of Adam Schiff due to Adam Schiff's failure to call for a ceasefire. Go to the piece and learn a little bit about what a bombing campaign would look like in Los Angeles if LA were to suddenly experience the same tragic fate as the Gazan and Palestinian people have over the past 2 months. Go and check it out to learn about Mizrahim Jewish folks, because their stories are important just as well. I totally recommend the piece. So, yeah, once you read it, shout yours truly out, and that's the work. That's how we get these stories, how we get Los Cuentos across to more of the city of Los Angeles. Okay, with that said, I want to just put 3 more items on your radar, and that is 3 different spaces/events that you can go and check out, including with your family, in support of Gaza and the Palestinian people, because as of just yesterday, Israel resumed its bombing campaign against the Palestinian people, even after already taken the lives of 15,000 and placing tens of thousands more at risk of famine and disease due to a complete annihilation of Gaza's infrastructure. Somehow, Netanyahu and his backers here in the United States have calculated and bet that they can continue forward in this massacre, in this onslaught, in this unfettered violence that the world has condemned and that the world will continue to condemn. And so these marches and these demonstrations are marches and demonstrations not just against a war by Israel, but against war by the United States on a helpless and defenseless people, because it is our tax dollars, my tax dollars, and your tax dollars which fund Israel's military assault. It is our tax dollars which pay for those bombs. It is our tax dollars which cross the distance between LA and Palestine. So please consider the next few events as potential opportunities to learn more and break bread with some other advocates for peace out there. Take the whole familia. I absolutely recommend it. The first event for this is actually taking place this Saturday, December 2nd, at Grand Park in downtown LA at 12 p.m. This is the Children's March for Palestine, and supporters for this include Students for Justice in Palestine at IVC, as well as the Latino Musulmana de America, as well as the Califas Brown Berets, and more. Go and check that march out. They are trying to get as many as 4,000 children to show out, because that is about as many as have been murdered by the Israeli bombing campaign over the past couple of weeks. And so it's definitely a family event. It's definitely something that you don't want to miss. The second event that I totally recommend for you is also taking place this Saturday, December 2nd, but this is at Beyond Baroque at 6:30 p.m. in the city of Venice. This is actually Writers for Palestine. And so funds from this event are actually going to the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. And so I totally suggest getting out there if you want to hear some poetry, if you want to hear some words by folks with family, folks with lineage in Gaza and Palestine, and their thoughts on the events as of late. Beyond Baroque is also a legendary space, and I can assure you that it will be a great event for you and your family or your community to check out. Go and hear from Rhys Langston, as well as Armine Iknadossian, as well as Paasha Motamedi, and more at Beyond Baroque in the city of Venice at 6:30 p.m. I'll also have a link in the show notes that you can click on in order to see the Instagram flyer for it, so it's all there for you. Okay, and the third event that I absolutely suggest you go and see this weekend, that I absolutely suggest you go and participate in or show out for this weekend, is Gentrification and Genocide by the LA Tenants Union, as well as the Palestinian Youth Movement. This is taking place right here in K-Town at 9 a.m. on Sunday, December 3rd at the Normandie Recreation Center. And so the LATU, if you've ever seen, is an organization that just expertly conducts protests and marches and rallies for the people, for neighborhoods all across, for those who would be defenseless were it not for their unionizing. And the Palestinian Youth Movement is, of course, dedicated to highlighting and uplifting the voices of the Palestinian people over the past few decades under occupation. So these two coming together is a serious tour de force, and I am very excited to see how this comes through. And I'll definitely be there on Sunday at 9 a.m. at the Normandie Rec Center in K-Town. And I hope to see you there too, because I think it's completely going to rock. And I think that Los Angeles is in great need of these two organizations coming together at long last. Okay, finally, with respect to all that, the final update for y'all is that yours truly will be interviewing quite an important figure with respect to reforming LA City Hall. and the political process at LA City Hall. We are setting up to conduct this interview on Tuesday, and so I just recommend that you stay vigilant and stay tuned for it. We've got our questions lined up already, which certainly cover the past few items that I noted earlier today. That is the Independent Redistricting Commission, as well as the expansion of the LA City Council, but also more. So I want to shout out the team that is helping to put this together with me, and I'm really excited to finally make it happen after long enough. And so just check back with JT the LA Storyteller to the best of your ability. If you haven't yet, hit that follow and subscribe button. It is high time, because as the end of the year wraps up and as we get into 2024, you are going to need to be plugged in. You are going to need to hear from the community. You're going to need to hear our questions for these various LA City Council candidates and also congressional candidates and more. You know that you have to hit that follow and subscribe button, and I know it too, so make it happen. Okay, with this said, I hope that you have enjoyed this brief update as much as I have. Trust that we'll be in touch again before too long, but before then, check out those notes. I've given you a handful of resources. These show notes are just rife with links to what you need to know about Los Angeles over the next few weeks. So stay vigilant and stay tuned, Los Angeles. It's J.T. out with more soon. It's Jimbo times.